You're listening to Recovery Survey, the podcast that shatters stigmas around different types of addictions and takes a deep dive into spiritual principles.
It was very much ego-driven, a lot of what I did. And it was all about perceptions. What did other people see? Did they see what I wanted them to see versus what I was hiding?
My guest today is named Dai Manuel, and I guess you would call him a life coach. I'm not exactly sure. Here's Dai to tell us more.
Okay, well, my name's Dai Manuel, and it's funny, Brett, you get that question, well, what do you do? I'm so used to that, after being an entrepreneur for pretty much my entire adult life. I've done my share of networking, let's just say that, and shaking hands. And people always inevitably say, hey, what do you do? And I used to be really ego-driven on that. So I was really attached to titles and would actually define a lot of my identity to that. And up to, well, I guess I'd say about 11 years ago, that all changed. And just the two titles now that usually when people say, hey, well, introduce yourself. I'm like, well, I'm a dad of two teenage girls. And that's probably the title that means the most to me in the world. And then I've been dating my wife for 21 years now. And so those are the titles. When people say, well, what do you do? I'm rather like, well, this is my life, and I try to show up and help people with transformations. Lots of different ways, physical, sometimes financial through their businesses. I've got a lot of business experience, 25 years, as well as 25 years in the health and wellness industry. So if I can help people change their life just a little bit, so they can gain a little bit more happiness, a little bit more joy, a little bit more fulfillment, then I sleep well at night, So anyways, that's just a little snapshot of a little bit about me.
I love that, man. I really do. Just what you said about taking the ego out and just presenting who you are, father, husband. That's beautiful, man.
Well, thanks. It is a choice, right? And it wasn't something that I felt came naturally, but it came out of necessity. And we'll probably get into that today, but I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah. So I'd love to hear more. You do coaching, correct?
I like to think I'm pretty good at helping support people through, it's not only challenges, but through growth. I think we all want to grow, don't we? Like, at least in some capacity. Like, I think, Brett, before we started recording today, I was just asking, like, what was that moment that you were like, I'm going to do a podcast, And I mean, it's a pretty special thing. And it doesn't just happen. Like, it happens really quick, like change can happen so fast. But sometimes there's a little bit of buildup, right? To that moment where we say, yeah, I'm going to make a change, or I'm going to do something for me. I'm going to do something that I feel drawn to do. There's always a little bit of a buildup. And I look at the buildup phase and I just try to help people through that portion, and open doors. And it's usually just through conversations, much like you do, and so coach, I often tend to prefer referring to myself as more of a mentor, because I tend to work with people that are looking to have changes in areas that I've already experienced change in. Do you know what I mean? Does that make sense? It's like, I'm better able to support people, especially if they're dealing with similar situations that I've already personally been through, because there's a different element and an ability to help navigate that. And it's just like, a great parent, or like even yourself, Brett, as a podcaster. Like I told you, I've got an interest in podcasting. Well, if I came to you and asked you questions and you were giving me some questions back to get clarity, that would be wonderful. But you can anticipate those kind of things because you've already been down that path. Do you know what I mean? Like, you can say, well, what are you going to use for a mic? Or what are you going to use to edit your audio? Or what platform are you going to host on? And I'd be like, oh man, I just thought I wanted to do a podcast. I didn't think about all that other stuff, right? But that's because you've been through that process. So you can ask some of these questions to help me with clarity before I even get into the hard work, get into the actual journey portion. And so that's sort of what I try to do for people, is help them anticipate some of the things that may come up that may prevent them from achieving the changes and the results that they want. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Cool. Because I will be picking your brain on podcasting. I'm just going to plant some seeds on that one
now. Yeah, of course. No worries, man. I love to help people. It's kind of my thing, man.
Totally. I pick up on that vibe 100%.
So what's kind of your bread and butter? Who's your typical client? I don't know. I don't know if you use the word client.
Yeah. I got a sort of rule of thumb, if I'm going to work with somebody and spend a lot of time with them, My wife and I, we sort of have a joke. It's like, so yeah, can you envision us sitting on a beach with them? Like having some coconuts. It's sort of our pre-screener, right? And it's like, yeah, I could totally see us just chilling and hanging in the sun and watching our kids play or whatever. Yeah, because I like to work with people I'd like to hang out with. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's probably similar to you, with who you ask to have these conversations with. I imagine you're looking for a certain energy. You're looking for a connection. And I mean, that's what we're all looking for in life, right? A little bit more connection, a little bit more sense of belonging, or even that mutual commitment we make as friends, right? It's like, hey, man, I'll be here for you. You're going to be here for me. And we're just going to support each other and trying to figure this crazy thing called life out. And I think that's sort of what I do. I also tend to speak. Like I'm someone that naturally is actually introverted, but I work as an extrovert, and that's a choice. And I had a friend of mine tell me, well, you're an ambivert. I'm like, what is that? And he's like, well, it's someone that can do both. And I'm like, well, trust me, when I work as an extrovert, I always got to take a big break afterwards. Like I'll speak at a conference or do a keynote or something along those lines. And it takes a lot of energy to put myself into that place. And I usually need a lot of downtime afterwards where I just withdraw and I'll curl up and look on my phone and watch Netflix. I just need that downtime to just unplug and not be around people, which is a choice, right? It's just sort of something that I've accepted. If I want to try to serve and impact people, like I got to step outside of that comfort zone. As the cliche goes. Like, you started your own podcast, Brett. Was there any of those little voices in your head just trying to like, oh man, I don't know, do I really want to do this? Did you have any of those?
Oh yeah, of course. And I'm in the same boat as you. I'm definitely an introvert, and I feel like when I do the podcast is when I'm stepping out of my comfort zone and being an extrovert and like having those conversations. And it gets easier the more I do it, the more I practice. I think that's anything in life. The more we do something, the better we get at it because we have more practice. And there's definitely a lot of those voices in my head, especially in the beginning. Like, I think some people refer to it as imposter syndrome.
Yes. Yeah.
And I definitely had a lot of doubts of like, does anybody really want to hear me? I don't know what I'm doing. This could be a huge failure. And then at the same time, I was like, well, since it's a new thing and not a whole lot of people know about it, if I fail, it's not that big of a deal. Like, I'm not really failing in front of that many people, I'm going to fail in front of my parents and my wife and a couple of friends. It's like, all right, I don't really care. Like, let's just try it. Let's see what happens.
Oh, well, it's that element of courage, right? It's recognizing that, yeah, I'm afraid. I feel intimidated by this idea. I definitely feel uncomfortable. And yet acknowledging that in a rational way and choosing to move forward. And that is courage, at its finest. And so that's pretty cool, because I think that's something that we all battle with every single day. To some level, we have those little voices in our head that prevent us from doing things that we feel drawn to do. Like there's a deep want. It's like, I want to do this. Well, why do you want to do it? And when we start asking ourselves the why questions, we start to realize there's this strong emotional connection to the things that we want to do. And the clearer we are with that, and the more we just sort of embrace that, at least from my experience, what I've observed is, gosh, it lights people up, right? Like you see just their entire lives shift. And it can be something super small. It doesn't have to be major. Like I had a client, she just started to take the stairs every day, like just that one little thing, rather, like with COVID and things shutting down and not having gyms and, just those restrictions, it's limited a lot of people from what they're accustomed to doing from even just a regular movement every day, just how they move their bodies. And hers was just, okay, well, I was on the 8th floor. I'm going to walk up and down the stairs every day. Anytime I got to leave my building to go get some, I'm going to take the stairs. But that one little piece compounded over time, over a period of a month, over 2 months, over 3 months. It's amazing how that subtle shift, and now it's looking for those other opportunities to move the body, with purpose. So it's like, instead of going to the corner store or the local coffee shop, by my car 2 or 3 blocks away, I'm going to walk there and back, and and I bring up this because it's just a subtle lifestyle shift, right? And yet it has a great positive shift on other areas in our life. And I think that's the beautiful thing about any sort of changes or leaning into those fears and challenging them, pushing back on them, because we realize we have so much more potential that we're probably limiting, just that lack of self-belief and self-commitment. So, Brett, you inspire me, man, like leaning in and doing it. That's why I'm like, after talking to you, I'm going to be talking to my wife today. I'm going to be like, I'm totally doing this podcast. And, so you mark my words, Brett, it's happening.
Yeah. And that's exactly what you got to do. Cause I toyed around with the idea for weeks, maybe even months. And then I was talking to another friend that he was thinking about starting a podcast, and he was like, just do it. And so I did. And then here he comes a few months later. He's like, all right, I'm going to start mine. And then he's like, what do I do? I'm like, all right, well, here's what I've learned. Let's talk about your gear. Like you were talking about, let's talk about gear. Let's talk about a host. Let's get you a plan. And so we did that. And he waited around for a little bit and kind of procrastinated, but he got all the stuff that he needed. And then I went over there, hung out with him. We recorded an episode, and I was like, all right, you did it. Like, you're a podcaster.
Oh, that's so good. Oh man, how cool is that? Oh, I love that you even showed up to help him do it. That first episode. Like, how good is that? Sometimes I think that's what we all want, right? We want that little bit of mentorship or that support. And when we get it, all of a sudden it's like, okay, this is somebody else that believes in me, right? Like, that's a nice feeling. It's a nice feeling to have that cheerleader. And that's why I say, like, you're in for a treat. I know you have a newborn due to arrive soon enough. And listen, man, that's it's going to be your biggest cheerleader, you're going to be the first superhero there. You're going to be the first hero, right? Like, it's a pretty big deal. Kids are an interesting motivation, and inspiration, if anything. So anyways, I digress. But where were we going? I'm like starting to lose my train of thought. I'm like, oh, what was it? What were we just talking about? We were talking about change, right? And leaning into some of the fear and doing it anyways. So yeah.
I love the point that you brought up about like the mentorship kind of aspect. And I think for me, that's kind of been a big factor in my life. I'm a recovering addict. I'm involved in a 12-step program. So I have a sponsor, and that's kind of the model that's kind of a mentor style relationship, where it's somebody that's several years older than me that has more experience, and he helps guide me through the process. And so I think I've kind of taken that idea and brought that into other aspects of my life of like, these people have helped me with these kind of things. So I want to be that person that can help somebody that's just starting out. Like, hey, here's what I did. Here's what worked. Here's what didn't work. And so I think that is really kind of spread into all areas of my life.
It's, oh man, that's powerful. And also just want to acknowledge you. I mean, it's been 11 years since I had a drink, and since I've had alcohol in my system, and also narcotics, which often my alcohol abuse would lead to that. And so I recognize this chosen sobriety is a big deal, to choose your life, your willingness to face up to the challenges, right? Like, I mean, that's what a lot of it is, what do we use for, right? Like, I don't know what your motivations were, but for me, it was just a way to escape, to numb myself, right? Like, just sort of avoid some of the stress and the anxiety, at least in the moment, put it off to tomorrow. I'll deal with that tomorrow. For tonight, I'll have a few drinks, and it's amazing how that just becomes a habit. A better part of my 20s and into my early 30s. Like, that was it. That was just what I did. And you talk about imposter syndrome. Holy smokes. I was feeling way out of integrity, right? Because I was acting like this. I always thought I was going to be this great man. And obviously great is a very subjective term. You got to sort of qualify or quantify that any way you want. But for me, it was like, have a great career, be able to make good money, have a family, have the cars, have the house, like, have the title in my work, that respect, the accolades, like all these things, right? All this imaginary checklist of what I thought was successful, and just chasing after it. But basically I was just the donkey, and somebody had that carrot out there. I don't even know who made the carrot, but it's out there and I can never reach it. And it used to drive me crazy because, the further I got away from realizing what I thought was going to make me happy, the more depressed I became, the more anxious, the more withdrawn at times, the more I felt I needed to just, well, I'm sad, I'm depressed, I'm like, anxious, a couple drinks, it'll be okay, and just that pattern emerges. And it's crazy how it affects every other area of life eventually. I've had debates with people like, well, I'm okay. Like, it doesn't really affect my other part. I'm like, you want to have this conversation, really? Let's own up to this. Like, it's recognizing that every choice, every action that we have has subsequent reactions, right? Like, there's cause and effect. And whether we accept those direct effects or not, we have to come to terms every once in a while and recognize, hey, is this pattern good for me or is it not? I mean, that's all it is. Like, I'm not to vilify drugs or alcohol. I mean, to each their own. Like, I just know for myself, it wasn't working, and I was going to lose everything. Yeah. I can dive into that if you want a little bit more, but didn't mean to leave you on a cliffhanger there. But it was quite the change 11 years ago.
Yeah, I would love to hear more about your journey in recovery and how you decided that you'd had enough and what led up to that.
Well, 11 years ago, I did what I did really well. Came home really late. Don't remember how I got home. And I had this ability. I would just turn my cell phone off and just tell my wife, "Oh man, my phone died." I had all these things that I would do out of anticipation, and I would do it before I'd even really started the drinking, or the partying or whatever it was I was doing. Basically just running away from dealing with a lot of other issues that I just didn't really accept. And so here I'm waking up the next morning, and my wife is clearly perturbed, to put it politely. She was pretty upset because, my kids were at this time 4 and 6. And they were watching Dora the Explorer. And please don't ever introduce that to your child, because that theme song, man, when it gets in, it will override everything. But I still remember it was one of my kids' favorite shows, and they're there watching Dora the Explorer. I come into the kitchen and my wife's unloading the dishwasher and giving me like this crazy stink eye, right? Like, I could just tell. Like, now my wife's a redhead and tinge of ginge. And she is fiery, right? And it's in her heritage. She wears her heart on her sleeve, but she'll also wear her emotions on her sleeve. And if she's not happy, she will let you know. And I've always appreciated that about it. Her ability to do that, because I'm someone that naturally doesn't express his emotions very well. I know that of myself. Now I'm working on it, but it's always a challenge. And so here she is, and she's upset. And the crazy thing is normally when my wife would look at me, and this is the reason why I fell in love with her way back when, was, when she looks at me, I can tell that she sees in me potential that I can't necessarily see in myself. And I think that's the amazing thing about that life partner, that when we have that person, like, they look at us and they just see nothing but amazing potential, and they want the best for us. And here I was abusing that, taking advantage of that. And I'd done this for years and years, but because I knew that, we loved each other and she'll forgive me, that idea of coming for forgiveness rather than necessarily permission, right? Like that, I would never say, "Oh, I'm going to go out with my friends. Is that okay?" No, I just go out, and I would justify why I would do that, because I was the income earner and I was the provider and all these things, that the titles that I talked about earlier, the ego, it was very much ego driven, a lot of what I did. And it was all about perceptions. What did other people see? Did they see what I wanted them to see versus what I was hiding? And so here's my wife sitting me down, very upset. And we proceed she proceeds to tell me, this is not the environment that our daughters deserve to be raised in. Going to take the kids. Like, we're done. And obviously, this is hard. We're both crying, and the kids are glued on the Dora the Explorer, which was great. They're just off in the other room, and because I didn't want them to know what we were talking about. I didn't want them to see their dad crying. I remember just all these certain concerns in my head, and we got to a point because she could tell that something was different. Like I had shifted. I was sharing a lot more than I normally would share. And it, not out of a need or a necessity, but because I really just wanted to. I felt like I'm going to be a bit vulnerable here. I'm going to share some of the stress, like, this idea like I'm failing at everything I'm doing, and there's all this stress and pressure on me to succeed, and I don't feel like I'm succeeding, and just started sharing all these things. And she asked me a question. She said, "Dai, are you being the type of man you'd want your daughters to marry? Are you being the type of man you would want your daughters to marry?" And the song, like a song that just sort of repeats in your head, you get that lyric and it's just like, oh my gosh, I can't get it out of my head. Well, that question became that for me. And I started to realize that I could not tell her otherwise. I couldn't look her in the eye right then and there and actually confidently be able to give her an answer that I believe to be true. No, I am a great dad. I am a great man. Because all of a sudden I realized, man, if a guy like me at that time showed up on my doorstep and wanted to talk to my daughters, let alone maybe sit down with them, have a meal or anything else, even romantic, I wouldn't let him across the threshold and be like, no freaking way. But yet that's who I was role modeling to them. I was saying, this is what's okay. And right then and there, I made a commitment to myself, but to my family as well, as I'm going to go 1 year without drinking. 1 year, no alcohol, which, I don't think I'd ever had anything like that since I was like 16, 17, right? Like, I don't remember a time ever going that long without having a drink. And so that was it. It was a 1 year commitment. And I realized after making the commitment and getting into it, because I was in a much different space, I was like, yeah, I'm doing this, for me. And I realized really quick that I just kicked away my crutches and I had a leg that was a bit atrophied, let's put it that way. And I had a limp and here I am thinking I'm just gonna be able to start running right away and take away those crutches. I realized that I didn't have a lot of tools or resources or skill sets to help me navigate this newfound sobriety. And that's where I needed support. And so, psychologist, I had a counselor, a relationship counselor. I attended some meetings. Like I basically just started doing a bunch of different stuff to really just focus on me. I realized I got to work on me because I am the connecting factor in all these things. I am the center of this web, and everything that's happening around me, I ultimately had an effect on that. Positively or negative, depends on how you want to look at it, But and that was just that full-on ownership of this is how I got here. This is my life, and these are the choices that brought me here. But where I want to go, it's away from here, and just being aware of those decisions after the fact. So there's lots of different things. I don't know for yourself, Brett. Like what have you found to be most influential in your development in recovery, like as you've progressed and been down this path? Like what have you found has been the habits or the inputs? I often will say, it's all often, but what do we feed our minds with, right? Like what is influencing a lot of our belief systems, our understanding, our knowledge sets? Like what is it that's moving in? And I find that controlling the inputs and controlling who I associate with were two of the biggest factors that helped me with just navigating the change. I'm curious about for yourself.
Well, I think that's huge. It's a cliche kind of thing that we hear a lot, but the people that we surround ourselves is what we become. So I think that's a huge part of the recovery journey, or just any sort of positive change in our life, is we need to surround ourselves with people that we want to be like. Even from my experience, like picking a sponsor, I picked a man that behaved in a way that I wanted to behave. I saw the way that he treated his wife. I saw the way that he handled difficult situations with his kids, and I saw how he handled himself at work, and I wanted to be like that. So I asked him to be my sponsor. So I totally agree that who we surround ourselves with is important because we become what we surround ourselves with. One of the other huge pieces, at least for me on this journey, that I've learned is getting new perspectives on things, because for so long I was stuck with my perception, how I viewed the world, and I didn't ever think about how anybody else saw things. How, I didn't think about anybody else's opinion. The only opinion that mattered is mine. What do I want? How am I going to get that? How am I going to make the people around me do what I want them to do? And then there's that perspective change of like, man, I'm not the center of the universe. Other people view things differently. Other people behave differently because of their experiences, like beginning to see the beauty of the other people around you and what they can bring to the table, what they can offer. And, just having those conversations and getting to know people and how they see things, why they see things, what they believe, what their convictions are. And that's been a big part of this podcast too, is just the opportunity to get to talk to people all around the world with all kinds of different lived experiences and understanding and wisdom and, successes, failures. It's just a beautiful thing to be able to connect to the world around you and to get some new information that's not just the same tape on repeat in my head, get something new in there. So that's been huge.
It's powerful, man. Like everything you just said there, like those are all like even just one of those habits, right? Or one of those shifts, if you will, like even just being open enough to recognize that, maybe my perspective isn't 100% on par with everybody else's. You know what I mean? Like maybe the way I look at this one little aspect of my life, well, maybe I'm not right. Like it's actually accepting that maybe I don't know as much as I think I know. Right. And it's that admitting that I really don't know what I don't know. And I think it takes a lot for someone to be able to say that, but also to recognize it and internalize it, but then actually to do something about it. Right? Like it's like, okay, well, do I want to change that? We very often find ourselves in our lives and, and it sounds like a cliche, but we hear the expression, you're at a fork in the road, right? Like we come to this point where we feel like we got two options and gosh, which one do I do? Do I go left or go right? Do I go up or go down? Like, do I make this change or not make this change? And I think sometimes we get to a place where, both options seem really scary. And we often just choose the one that seems less scary. And that's okay. As long as we recognize that. And is that what influenced this? Was it a fear-based decision or was it a decision that I reasoned through? And I don't think it's ever easy to answer, nor is it easy to be aware of oneself when faced with that situation and to actually be able to look at it rationally versus emotionally. Because we're just emotional beings, right? Like a lot of people say, no, we're humans that are emotional. I'm like, no, we're emotional humans. We're sentient beings. We feel stuff. Like that's who we are. So learn how to roll with that, right? How to channel it, how to observe it when it's happening. And I think, just to add to your list of things that have been useful, like meditation or that practice of mindfulness daily, gratitude, reflecting on what am I grateful for? And I'm sure those are probably things that you've also done. But those are things that are kind of front of mind for me that have stuck. Like those are like some of those habits that I believe are timeless, and they doesn't matter whether you're someone on a journey of recovery or not. These are still practices that are awesome for going from having a good life to a great life. Do you know what I mean? Like that just that ability to shift and see things just differently. And find the joy in every moment that we're alive versus, thinking about, well, I'm not going to be really joyful until I have that vacation. Oh, well, restrictions. I'm going to have to wait till after that, but limiting our happiness or sense of joy based on things that might be out of our control. These types of conversations, like I get me really excited only because I can imagine that people listening to this, they're automatically thinking of instances in their own life where they've been in these situations where they've had these epiphanies, if you will, or they've had these moments where it's like, I know that if I lean into this more, I do a little bit more of this, there's going to be some big changes. But sometimes changes are scary, right? Because it's the unknown again. It's like, I don't know what's going to happen. Like I've gone through big changes, and because I went through that whole transformation 11 years ago, I started a transformation journey. It started a process of really connecting to what I wanted to be, and then leaning into that, right? But on that process, I realized that the career I'd been in for 17 years wasn't where I was going to be happiest any longer. And then coming to a realization, I was like, oh man, this journey I've been on for 17 years here, thinking that this is the path, this is what I'm meant to be doing, this is my vocation for life. And all of a sudden thinking, I don't think it is. I think I'm meant to do something else. In fact, I feel drawn to do something else. Well, what does that mean? Oh, I'm going to quit this job. What am I going to do? It's like, oh man, your world gets rocked, right? Because all of a sudden you think, yeah, this thing that I'm doing, this career that I'm in, like, this is it. This is what I'm meant to be doing. Because for years and years, that's what I believed. And all of a sudden, you go through this big shift, perspective changes, your view on life changes. And it's like, whoa, this path that I'm on, I think I'm going to have to change it. And that was scary. Like, I think a lot of people deal with that one, especially in the year that we just had, a lot of people's vocations have been challenged just because the way we do work, the kind of works that we do, the kind of services we provide, it's all been challenged over this last year. So I think all of us are in that space of just like reviewing things, right? And anyways, I digress again. Sorry. I have this tendency to go off in these wild, it's kind of like a boomerang, right? We'll go, okay, when's he coming back? I don't know. He threw that pretty far. It's like, it's going to come back up, hit us up back of the head some point. Anyways, my apologies on that.
No worries. I appreciate you sharing part of your recovery journey and kind of the events that led up to you seeking that change. I really appreciate you sharing that.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Well, thanks for creating a space that I felt comfortable sharing it. But also it's cool because I also know that the people that are listening to this or watching it, I know that they too have their own stories. We all have these stories, and I love it because you and I, our stories, well, today they intersected, didn't they? Like there's this moment where our two stories, our two narratives intertwine. And I think that it's those intersections in life that make life really interesting, right? Because sometimes, we almost feel like it's random, but is it random or is it meant to happen? And this is where I get going on these sort of philosophical rants. My background's in philosophy and English lit, but I ended up working in the fitness industry because, philosophy and English lit, it's like, what else are you going to do? But as my parents say, what a useless degree, but whatever, I enjoyed it. But I love these kind of conversations around life because I think we all share that one thing in common. I think we all want a little bit more happiness and we all deserve that. So how can we support each other in getting it, right? And so anyways, this conversation has been a lot of fun. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for coming on, man. I really appreciate it. It's always great to connect with more people and, like you were saying, to have our stories intersect and get some new perspectives, get some new ideas. And I really appreciate it, man. I love your energy and just the positivity that you bring. I think it's fantastic.
Oh, well, thank you. I'm definitely biased to optimism. So it's and some people, they're like, you're almost, overly optimistic. And I'm like, yeah, it's definitely a bias. But I prefer it to the alternative. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, what's the opposite of that? Well, I don't want to be biased to negativity. I'll tell you that. I've been there before and it didn't serve me very well. So it is a choice. And I think that's, if I'm going to leave anything with anybody today, and I'm going to riff on something that Buddha said, like 2,500 years ago, this too shall pass. We're all dealing with our challenges in life, but we get through them and we learn from them if we choose to. And, but the thing is about Buddha, even though he said this too shall pass, and a lot of us think it just means that the hard stuff in life, the hardships, the challenging stuff, like, yeah, don't worry, we'll get through this. We're resilient. Yeah, we are. We're resilient. But he was also talking about the good stuff. Those moments like when your first child's born and your second child, your third child, it's always a big event. But the first time you met your wife, right? Or your life partner, that first time you accomplished that really hard task, on the day that you launched your podcast. Like there's all these amazing things, but they happen and then they pass, right? And so it's this idea of just bringing back our awareness to right now. And, Eckhart Tolle, Power of Now, Tony Robbins, Simon Sinek, a lot of these talk about these concepts, but it's just a matter of creating the space for us to think about right now and be appreciative of what we got right now. So that practice of daily gratitude, maybe some journaling, a little bit of meditation, gosh, little tiny things. I want to invite anybody that's listening to this, just implement just a little bit of that. Do it for 30 days and write me if you don't notice any positive changes. I probably won't hear from anybody now. I should probably say, hey, reach out if you see some positive shifts. Be more opportunity to have conversations, because I don't think anybody will reply, because I know based on what I've gone through and the people I've had an opportunity to connect with, it's just such a simple thing. And you can't help but make your life better. And I hope I can leave that with everybody today, just that reassurance that, hey, you're not alone. You got this. So let's do it, Anyways. Game on.
Awesome. Well, would you like to let the listeners know if they want to find out more about you and what you're doing? Where can they do that?
Oh, sure. Well, the cool thing about having a unique name, it's unique and it's pretty SEO friendly, because I don't have met anybody else with my name. But Dai, spelled D-A-I, it's a Welsh name for David. And then my last name is Portuguese, Manuel, M-A-N-U-E-L. And I'm a mix. But as I say to everybody, I'm a Canadian. Okay. So that's just pretty much par for the course up here. We're all a little bit of everything. And I'm really easy to find on social. Facebook and Instagram, I'm most active, but also on TikTok and the other channels, just my name. What's probably of greatest value for those that are listening, if you go to my website, which is just my name.com, so daimanuel.com, there's over 1,500 articles that I've curated as well as published over the last, 12 years. I've been creating content, and it's all geared to just helping you get a little bit more out of everyday life. And when I say every day, it's literally a little bit more every day. And if you get a little bit of improvement every day, it's amazing what happens in a very short period of time. So it's just all lots of information, and good luck when you go down that rabbit hole. It is a bit of a rabbit hole. There's a lot of twists and turns. And we talk about fitness one day, and the next day I'm talking about hormones. And the day after that, I'm talking about mindset, it's all over the map. So I apologize for that. This is just a bit of the way my brain works sometimes. So anyways, game on, enjoy it. And if anybody has any questions, reach out anytime. I got tons of free resources on my site. And Brett, but before we say goodbye, I just want to acknowledge you, man. Honestly, thank you for putting this out to the world, but also in a niche that needs a bigger voice, it really does. The recovery journey is not a light journey, I think it leads us to lightness, but it's hard. I think back to my changes. It was hard. It was really hard, but it didn't matter how hard it was worth it. And I can see what you're putting out to the world, and the content you're creating, the space that you're providing people to share and talk about this is really important. So just wanted to acknowledge you and say thanks. Really, that's awesome, man.
Well, thank you. And I appreciate you taking time out of your day and coming on the show and sharing with whoever's listening about your journey, what you're doing. Like I said, I love your positivity. Just your message is so great, man. I really do appreciate it. Very encouraging.
Thanks, man. Well, we'll have more conversations, and mark my words, everybody can listen to this right now. Just you wait, because Brett will be on my podcast soon enough. So there, I just went on. I'm on record now saying that. So anybody that knows me, when I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. So thanks for giving me that little push, Brett.
Absolutely. Glad to help. Dai, thank you again for coming on the show today. I really enjoyed our conversation. Be sure to check out his website for more information. The link for that will be in the show notes. You've been listening to Recovery Survey. If you got anything out of today's episode, I'd ask you to please leave us a 5-star review and share this episode with a friend. If you'd like to get in contact with us, you can find us at recoverysurvey.com. You can listen to all of our episodes on the website, as well as connect with us on social media, where you can get previews for upcoming episodes.